Yeah, you can hear me. I'm loud.
So let's start with a simple question. I think it's on everybody's mind. Who's the youngest?
I think
No
Priscilla's.
comment.
I think
No?
Priscilla's the
Priscilla.
youngest.
Priscilla's the youngest?
Yeah.
Because I was very obvious between two of y'all that y'all were in competition with who's older than the other one. Right? I knew that.
Must be talking about Andy and
No.
Norman.
No, Norman.
Glenda and I.
Ah, the story.
She just can't remember when she was born.
It's not on my birth certificate. And
No.
yours either, probably.
The only reason I remember it at 7 o'clock. Daddy was trying to get out and start planting peanuts. They planted them earlier back then. So as soon as he seen that I was all right and bigger than a cow, he said, "I'm going to plant peanuts. Y'all got it here."
That's the story you got.
Yeah, and I'm sticking with it. I weighed 11 pounds and 12 ounces.
Really? That's a big baby.
Yeah, I was a big boy.
You're ready to play ball right then, wasn't you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm much younger, but they let me hang out with them.
Well, you bring their class level a little bit higher.
Right. Well, okay. Thank you.
What kind of memories do y'all have from growing up? You guys, Dale County. What do y'all remember from those days?
Work.
It was.
Work. Right.
Yes.
Everybody had to work. Right. There wasn't a Social Security check coming to nobody.
No, we were poor. And I was the youngest of 5, sister's oldest. And we're blessed. We all are still fairly healthy and living. My sister's 87. And 1, 2, 3, 4. The 3 older boys, they were 18 months apart just about. And then I came along 6 years later. So I'm proud to be here because I was an accident. Can you put that on there?
Good.
I remember your older brothers better for their baseball playing.
Oh, yeah. All 3 of them were on the same team.
And
Yeah.
every Sunday afternoon, and somewhere in the area, there was like a minor league baseball.
Similar to that, yeah. They had this. I played with them. All 4 of us were on the team. I was a lot younger. And but anyway, I know Jerry, the one closest to me, he pitched a perfect game against Ozark in 1956, I think it was, or 57.
Was that a high school game?
High school. Mm-hmm.
I am a newcomer to the group. I was born in Dothan and lived there. Actually started school, went to school 1 semester, and my parents moved to Houston, Texas. And so we lived there for 6 years. And then we moved back 2nd semester, which was for us in February. So I moved back to Midland City, or we moved to Midland City in, I think it was 1958. And I came back. So I was the new kid on the block there for the rest of that year because I came in February and I was an oddity because for Midland City you didn't have a lot of people moving in. It was a very small 1st through 12th grade school that had about 400 students throughout the school. I had moved from an elementary school that was upper elementary that had over 1,000 students. And so it was quite a culture shock to me. And it took me a while to kind of get my feet on the ground. So I didn't know these guys until, then. I didn't meet your mother until we were in middle school, or what we called junior high school at that time. I met my husband because he was in the same grade. Okay, so he decided he liked the new girl. So he was very attentive to me for that rest of that year. Your daddy lived a block from me. I could step out my front door and he could step out his front door. And we could actually, if we ever had the time, would have waved at each other. But neither of us ever had time because I have 7 younger brothers and sisters. So I was busy all the time, and your dad always worked hard. And so we never saw each other, which is very unusual, but we never saw each other except that we went to church together. So, and his mother was very involved in the church. She was our MYF director. She was the person that hauled us to sub-district. So she was very dear to us, you know, and very close to her, and a sweet, sweet lady. The thing that I remember the most is it seemed as if everybody were on the same playing field. No one had a lot, but everybody had enough. And we were all happy. We just didn't have the drama that you have now with kids of entertaining them. There was no entertaining. You worked from the time you got home till you went to bed. If you had a few minutes to watch TV with the family after you got your bath, that was the time that you did that. Everything was done as a family. We went to church. Everybody went to church. So church was a big part of our family, and community, because church tied you together with the things. But you could walk. You played outside till after it got dark, and your mom didn't think anything about it. You caught fireflies and played kickball and that sort of thing, and nobody worried about you. You could walk to town. My friend across the street was a year older, was in your dad's class, Nan York, and she and I were very good friends. And during the summer, we would walk to town to the drugstore, and it was not a dangerous thing to do for two young girls to be able to walk to town and back. And it was just a slower pace and a great time. I wouldn't take anything from my growing up years and my young years. And the thing that is so special is the four of us are still tied together and are still friends and still mean so much to each other. And your mom and dad and Norman and I have been married for years and years and years, 57 and 58 years. So, we're comfortable with each other, and we're each other's best friends. So that's what I remember.
You remember, like you talked about the difference in the generations. Back then, when you were a child and you got a toy, having a toy was a big deal, right? Nowadays, you see kids, they got toys everywhere, right? Do y'all remember I remember a zipper Dan that I had. I had buttons and a little zipper, and he was my little toy doll. Do y'all remember a toy when you were a kid? Any of you guys? Any kind of toy?
I had a red fire truck that I don't remember when I got it, but I remember in the first grade there was a request by the teacher to bring a toy, and so I brought the red fire truck, and I remember being concerned that I was going to get it back because I didn't want to. She set up some kind of display, and I remember making sure every day when I went to school that I checked to make sure the fire truck was still there. So Priscilla, whenever you moved to Midland City, was it the middle of the sixth grade? Were you in the sixth grade?
Yes, it was in February of the sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And you and your family, I remember the first remembrance I have of you is your family showing up at church.
Yes.
And I'm like, there's a new girl, and then all those other kids following behind her. You were the little mother.
That's right. That's right.
Even in the sixth grade, you were the little mother.
We moved here. My mother was expecting my youngest sister, who is 12 years younger than I am. And I will say, as a caveat to that, there is a set of twins in that group. Thank goodness. But my mother was expecting my sister in May, and we moved in February. Well, we moved at the end of January, and so I started school the 1st of February. And it snowed. I'd never seen snow. When I had lived in Alabama for 6 years, it had never snowed. When I'd lived in Texas for 6 years, it certainly never snowed in Houston. And I came back to Alabama, and it snowed, and I thought, oh, this is horrible. On top of everything else, this is horrible because, our snows are just, they're messy, the little bit it snows. And so I thought, what have my parents done to me? I thought I was devastated. It didn't take me long to find out that people were so different. Even the students were so different in Midland City than they were in this huge school that I was in Texas, in Houston. people talked to you. They made friends. The very first day when I walked in, this gaggle of girls came up to me, you know, and they'd say, "We'll show you where the bathroom is and where the lunchroom is, and we'll tell you so and so." And they told me a lot more than I needed to know, to tell you the truth. But anyway, it was just so different. But it was very meaningful to me, because this is not how it had been in Houston at all. People were not that friendly. Not that classmates didn't talk to each other, but they didn't get personal, because they didn't know, nobody lived close to each other.
Yeah.
It was very, very different. So moving to a small town at first was just an eye opener for me, because at first I thought people are just nosy, and I'm not ruling that out. But I'm saying that all of that is not just being nosy. A small community truly cares about who moves in, and they want to be, you know, a part of those people's lives, and they want to find out. But we were rather an oddity, you know, with 7 little kids and a baby in arms, and 10 of us moving anywhere we went. We did draw attention, you know.
I worked in the drugstore that you visited later, and you said that you didn't have anything to fear when you walked to town. Well, P.P. King, you had you had to go around P.P. King.
We would go around the block to avoid that. we walked an extra block to avoid one man that was just too friendly, you know. So we would walk behind his business and sneak in the other way to the drugstore, and he would camp out at the door of his business and watch who came in and out the drugstore. So sometimes he'd try to waylay us a little bit, but that didn't work either with one of us. My dad and mom were very strict, and you know, had I told my dad that, you know, this man wanted to hug me or, you know, anything, my dad was just the type that he would have taken him to task pretty quick. And I didn't want that kind of problem, you know, or that kind of notoriety of, you know, being a hothead. Unfortunately, my family had kind of been known as that. And I think when I first came, I had to live down a reputation. Older, but I have uncles that are just a little bit older than I am. One of them finished school actually the year after I did, and after repeating several grades. But anyway, that's an aside. But anyway, he just wasn't too interested in school. But being the youngest of 15, he had been babied all his life, so he didn't really know that responsibility was something he was supposed to assume. But it was a reputation that I did have to live down and have to prove that, you know, we're different. You know, our parents are very strict. We don't do this, we don't do that, we don't use bad language, we don't smoke, we don't talk back to our moms and dads. It was yes ma'am and no ma'am. And you know, if mom says do something, you don't hesitate to do it, you jump to do it. If your daddy looks at you, you do it. You didn't even have to say to do it, just looks at you, you do it. And there was no back talking, there was no arguing, there was no debating that you did what you were told to do. Or most of the time, you know, very soon, you didn't have to be told to do it. You just knew to do it, you know. It was a different time, quite different. But.
Getting back to the first thing I remember is a little red wagon, and then a little Red Ryder BB gun, a little hand pump, and it didn't have much pressure, but I was a big white hunter because I killed many innocent little birds all through the trees and fence rows. I don't know how old I was. I wasn't old when I started having to milk a cow every morning, every night. And I made good friends with some of the cash. We get out and butt heads and play little white face cash. And I'll never forget when we butchered that one. Daddy had it killed for meat. And I wouldn't eat beef for years. My brothers were older, so they were out in the fields working. I had to do all the work around with the chickens, the hogs, the cows, and help Mama cook a lot. So I learned how to cook. Besides, after we got married, she taught me even more. And I love to do a lot of baking and all now.
He bakes really good coconut cakes
Yeah.
and chocolate
Yeah,
layered
that's my
cakes.
specialty is coconut pound cake. But the older brothers and all, every time it rained, it would be a chance for us to stop. And whatever the season was, we would get out between the house and the barn, pretty large area there, and that was our ball field. And we broke out a few window panes, and an old house similar, you know, as far as the walls and all to this one, except you had cracks in that one. You could see through them. And anyway, we'd have a basketball goal. We had a big pole up, and a lot of times on older, I remember my granddaddy on my mother's side. We called him Big Papa Andrews, and he would come down 7 miles from Newton. When I'd milk the cow early in the morning, he'd want some hot milk. Mom would strain it and drink it out of the glass, and he'd drink it warm, and I couldn't stand it warm. Old Red was my cow. She gave a lot of milk, 5 gallons a day, 2.5 gallon pails. I'd fill it up in the morning and night, and I'd leave one of them for the calf, whichever calf it was at the time. I'd go in the corn crib and didn't realize how allergic I was to dry corn then, the shucks, you know. I'd come out when I used an old hand sheller, shell it for the chickens, and go throw it in the pan. Had an old rooster that would fly over the fence and chase me around the house. I'd just aggravate him. And he'd cut under the house, under the corners, big old redhead rooster. And I'd run him to about death, but he would fly out, but then I'd have to put him back. You know, he wouldn't fly back in. It was like a game to me, but I think he'd really get mad at me, you know.
I remember your dad when I worked in the drugstore.
Yeah,
Your dad coming in from time to time.
yeah.
I think you look a whole lot like your dad.
Yes.
When I put my reading glasses on, the older people used to tell me, say, you look just like your dad.
Yeah.
So I wasn't the milkman or all of those types youngin'.
You
Because I was come along 6 years later from the youngest.
You belong to your dad.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
But what generation would you say y'all grew up in? You know, what, y'all 50s kids or
Late
60s?
50s.
Well, we're actually because when we actually hit the time that we were kind of a little bit independent and could date and was early 60s. So really, I look more at the early 60s because before that, it was just kind of drudgery. You know, go to school, come home and work and babysit and that kind of thing. But I see ourselves as more early 60s, don't you all? Because you finally got a little bit of independence. You finally hit 16 and mama let you date, you know, so.
Yeah, I had to babysit too. I had an 8-year-old sister too, you know.
So what was it like to be a teenager in those times and go through, like, y'all were going to a brand new high school. Dad, you snapped the first ball for Dale County High School to Norman McKnight, the quarterback, right? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Tell us about those times.
Well, it was interesting. There was not a lot of discussion that I remember about there being a new school. It just sort of happened.
Right.
I mean, near the
Bump
end
and circumstance.
of my 11th grade and their 10th grade, it was announced that we'd be going to a different school next year. I worked the summer before my senior year and before Dale County opened. I worked with the County Road and Bridge Department and helped run some of the levels that were run to dig out the floor of the football field and to make the 2 banks that now the seats are on. I worked with one of your uncles who was basically the engineer. The county engineer at the time was an Auburn graduate, O'Neill Ham, and he got the stadium floor plan from Auburn. So the field has the slopes and the drainage system that the Auburn Stadium has.
And to this day, It's probably one of the prettiest and the best field for us, the slopes and all to play on. The water runs off good of anywhere around. 60 years this coming year, it'll be the anniversary.
So
We played the first game on the middle of the season, we played at Million City Flyers High School, which was a quarter of a mile away or something.
Yeah,
We'd go over there and we'd practice and play. And then after we started to the new school for the first, I think, 3 or 4 games, we would drive back after school and practice on the old field. And we'd actually play there too, the home game. But it was a time. And then they didn't have the gym ready even before I graduated. Nice old gym over there. A lot of them wanted to name it after me.
Tell me more about that.
Well, on Saturday mornings, Curry Mac Palmer was our coach when I was in the 9th grade. I'd go down and climb up, raise the window and go in and shoot basketball. And he found out about it, so he didn't correct me or say anything about it, except I'll come down and practice with you. He was a good athlete, a little small, short guy. So we played one-on-one a lot. And but in that gym, I was really good. I knew those goals and all. I scored 54 points in one game in there. And next year, senior year, I scored 53 in Columbia one time, there was no 3-point shots then. And a lot of my shots, even though I played point guard, was shot from outside. And was 6-foot sits and long arms, and so I had to learn. And my older brothers are all good athletes. My daddy was a super athlete, and anyway, he loved ball too. So we all would play ball a lot in the yard with all of them. But I had to learn to shoot from way outside and across 134, which was the main road then before they ever built the 4-lane. Bobby and Jimmy Dashner would come across over there, and we'd play basketball a lot in our yards, and they both were good athletes. And Jimmy played with us in high school. Bobby was 3 years older. But I remember things like that. My brothers were all picking on me all the time, teasing me about things.
I remember riding down there and hearing the ball bounce in the gym, and on Saturday,
Yeah.
Riding on my bike, and I'm like, yep, Norman's playing ball.
Yeah.
The school opened without a bunch of fanfare, as I remember, and Priscilla remembers more than I do about the selection of the colors and the mascot and so forth. We had a new principal, and we had a lot of new teachers. Our principal was James Tucker, and he sort of specialized throughout his career in starting up new schools. He left, he retired up in North Alabama and opened up, I think, several new schools up there. It was strange, a new building. We didn't have to worry about sticking sticks in our feet from walking down the wood floors, or we had a lot of people that had quit school that came back to school. A lot of people like, oh well, I'll come back and graduate. Let's get a new start here. It was interesting to start something new and be involved. Priscilla, why don't you tell us about the school, the color selection and so forth?
When Dale County High School was built, Midland City High School and Newton High School were closed, so it was a consolidation because both of the old schools had part of them condemned, so they no longer were even safe for us to be there. So there was a consolidation of those two schools, but it happened to be in sight of Midland City property because that was the land that had been donated. There was a little bit of animosity with the some of the students outside of the Midland City area because the school was placed in Midland City. So we had to overcome also not only that we were in a new school with a new, as your dad said, a new principal, new teachers. We had new friends and new students in there, but they didn't want to be there. And we were all very excited because we had come from a school that we loved and we didn't want to give up our colors. And we didn't want to give up our mascot name, which were the Flyers. We thought we were really, top dog because we had green and white and it was nothing prettier than our uniforms, we thought. And we found out, gosh, the Newton folks felt the same way. They thought that they were, I think they were the Wolverines.
Wolverines. I had a lot of cousins that was in the Newton school.
They thought that they were, top dog, and it was a bit of a juggling act for all of us. We all had to do some give and take there, but it was interesting. It was great because we learned, we met a lot of those new people that came in, but what we were told was, you won't have any colors of either school. You will have nothing that reminds you of the mascot name of either school. You will have the movers and shakers there. We got involved in everything and still do, but we were given the cheerleaders and the band and the ball players were essentially the people that got to decide to make some choices here. And so we narrowed it down to several different things that we would like to have. And one of the choices we'd come up with was no one had red, white, and a Columbia blue. A Columbia blue is it's a different color. It's not a color that's used often. And we thought that's very different. No one has that. So that was one of the choices we had come up with. And we had also come up with the name Warriors. I can't even remember some of the other selections, but we came up with the name Warriors. We presented it then to the committee which was the principal and the teachers and the cheerleader sponsor and the coach. And then they announced it to the student body. And the student body got to then, after we had narrowed it down, choose, okay, which one do we really want? Well, we kind of push the red, white, and blue and the Warriors because that's what we had decided was unique. And that's what we wanted for this consolidated school, was unique. And so we told everybody, this is what we want. So they had a say in it, but they didn't have a big say in what we had done. So we became the Warriors, and we were red, white, and Columbia blue. And we still, to this day, have to fight for that Columbia blue.
The original colors that were used for the uniforms was that Columbia blue.
Yes.
And the red and white were sort of accent colors. And I guess there was a time that in the history of the school that red was used prominently, but now I think it's back to the Columbia blue.
I think that our Alumni Association has had a great deal to do with influence in that the last few years, because we have made a push for the fact that they also changed we had a warrior head, a chief head, as our mascot. And somewhere along the way, they decided that they didn't want the chief. They wanted, since we were named Warriors, they wanted something that looked just like a warrior, a regular warrior. So they changed the image of our mascot. And that didn't sit well with a good many of our older group. And so we've gradually gotten that old mascot put back in on a good many things. It's not always used, but you see more and more. It's being painted on our buildings again, and it's being used in our yearbooks and that kind of thing. And so we're getting back to where we were when we first started. And change is good sometimes, but sometimes it's really upsetting because that was not what was originally, planned. And but anyway, we are 4 very, very proud alumni. We all love our school where we went. We feel a very close tie to it, and it's always hard for us to think that somebody else doesn't feel the same way we do. But we love it. I can't believe that we've been graduated almost 60 years. I mean, I look at the pictures and I look at the mirror, and I can't coordinate the two of who I am and who I was, because I don't know where the time has gone. I'm much like your mom in the fact that if somebody says, "Can you do so and so?" I don't know the word no. Oh, sure, I can do that. I'll do that. And then my body says, "Whoa, here, you might need to do that next week."
Norman, take a minute if you don't mind and tell me about work. You said the first thing that was brought up when I said, tell me about the old days, you said work.
Work.
Tell me about that.
Well, my dad was probably the hardest worker I've ever known. Farming, rented the land, didn't own anything. We didn't own the house we lived in. That went with the land and all. And anyway, we didn't know it. Mama had our clothes ironed. They were clean. We didn't go out of the house without them, if we were going somewhere. And like Scylla said about her family, we were always in church. We still go up to the Newton Assembly of God every now and then in Newton. Matter of fact, the McKnights practically built that church originally, my daddy and his brothers. But work was just unknown. One of the hardest jobs I remember doing, the roughest thing, was clearing 2 rows of corn through the middle of a cornfield in July, so we could put a fence through there and put the hogs in half of it, and because there'd be so much waste to put them in both of them. But I remember some of the old sows that were really mean, and some of the cows were pretty mean, and you'd have to stay alert and watch out for them a lot of times. I remember Daddy breaking his toe with his brogans on, kicking a big sow one time to keep her away, because we'd grab one of the pigs to do some surgery on it, and she tore through the fence. They were protecting their mamas. And we had an outhouse until I was on up in high school. Daddy bought some land right in front of the old house there and built a new house. I was just turned 16 when they moved in that house. And anyway, it's still there, and that's where my sister lives now.
It's an interesting thing. At some point in our world, there was a term that changed, right? You used to live in a house that you built,
right,
or was handed down from the family. And all of a sudden, our culture began to buy a house. We're going to go and build, or somebody else built a house. You talked about your daddy building a house. You have built a house right here.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to construct something? Is that something that you like? Is that?
Oh yes, yeah. I've always loved building. Daddy used to say that only one of us that could build anything was me. I mean, he couldn't build anything, but he was good at doing the other mechanic and all, working on the tractors and things like that. And my brothers were, but I never did care a whole lot about that. And I actually got it from one of his daddy's brothers, probably. Daddy used to tell me he was the best finish carpenter he'd ever seen. He'd take a handsaw and cut angles and all with it and put it up, and it'd be perfect, And when I was building this last house up here, I just sketched off the plans and built it. And anyway, he would come over before he died, and he'd come over, he says, "I guess you got your building experience from," I can't remember his name, Jim, I think it was, McKnight. But anyway, that's where I got mine, and started out with Sears when we got out of high school. We got married, and I had to get a job. And luckily, I got on with Sears. One of her aunts was there and called and said that they was open if you'll come. And these are from the old Sears coffee shop. And I used to go in early, 6 o'clock, and let the cleanup crew in. And I made a pot of coffee every morning. But then I actually physically tore it all out, block walls, windows, and everything, and remodeled. And once I did all that, they let me do that in that store. Last 6 years with Sears, I traveled all over the Southeast remodeling stores. The biggest one was in Savannah. I was there 6 months. It was a $2 million job way back in the early 80s. And Priscilla came and the boys came and we stayed on Tybee Island. Sears they paid for everything. We leased the place up there. And I will never forget Priscilla backed the side of the car into one of the big columns where we were parking. And she told the youngest one, Chuck, says, now don't you tell Daddy they would come back in. It's 19 miles back to the store. And anyway, I was used to working. I worked sun up, sundown. And she told Chuck not to tell me about the car, that she would tell me. Well, he was used to going in Sears stores because he was it, you know, going down to Sears store. Well, he saw me down the hall, and this store was a 2-story building. Store, it was huge. Number 3 in the United States at the time in sales and profit. 2 stores in California beat it. The store was full. We were trying to remodel it. But Chuck sees his daddy way down the hall, way down the aisle with the customer. Daddy, Daddy, Mama wrecked the car. she was tracking him down anyway. I said, what? You know. But growing up, we had to work. The oldest 2 brothers, Daddy would take them and put one on each side of him, and they would pick a bale of cotton in a day. That's 1,500 pounds, you know. I picked a lot of cotton, but not like my older brothers had to. And Jerry, one older man, he didn't pick that much because he jumped off a big wagon load of cotton and drove his leg up into his hip when he was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and didn't say anything, and it hurt him and hurt him and hurt him. Finally, he wound up in Children's Hospital in Mobile for 6 weeks or so. And I remember going with him down there. I was a little old bitty thing. I remember going through that old tunnel under the river originally. You know, it scared me to death. I remember things that scared me like that. And but we worked. We would work. We had it all: cotton, peanuts, corn. Daddy had a little garden. It wasn't a little garden, a big garden. And he kept 2 old mules that he used to farm with to plow his garden and all with. I remember the first time I talked him into letting me try to plow. Well, I couldn't gee and haul them. They wouldn't listen to me, and I couldn't. He had to run over and grab that thing and stop him. I was plowing up there at the garden. And things like that I really remember. And getting out in the yard playing ball. We'd play, my daddy and I and Jerry, which was one closest to me, would play my 2 older brothers in football during football season. And I remember my oldest brother got mad one time at Daddy because he called something and he didn't agree with me. He kicked the football and it hit Daddy. Well, Daddy started after him. He went running around behind the outhouse. And about the time he started to jump, Daddy's brogans caught him in the back end and he went over head first about 10 foot. I remember one thing that Daddy beat me bad with his hands. I was young, but we had gotten a TV and I wanted to watch something besides what Daddy and Mama was watching that night. The older ones were out and older. Like I say, I was 6 years younger than Jerry, so I was probably in the 5th grade or so. And I grabbed a bedroom shoe and threw it and hit the TV, and I had to take off. Mama had to pull him off of me anyway. He had a red-headed temper. I loved him to death, and I still respect him today because of things like that. You knew where you stood. If you did something, you knew what was going to happen. He would have been put under the jail now, some of the things he did. But we respected that and still do. We were close. My mother was very, very smart, finished the 6th grade, and that's as far as she went. Left-handed, like Andy. And she was a good ball player, too. She'd get out in the yard and play with us. But she didn't work. She kept house and cooked and cleaned, and that was her job.
Norman, talking about work and building, when you started this project here,
Yeah.
what was the vision that you had?
Well, we had talked about the distance from this column to there, and this wide is what we wanted it. I wanted to put it on down, there's a little hill down there, a knob. with two big ditches on each side. That's where I actually wanted to put it. And Priscilla talked me into this putting it closer to the house, which was a good thing because I made about 1,000,000 trips from here up to my shed where my table saw is, and going back and forth and getting tools.
Oh, yeah.
And if you lay one down somewhere, I couldn't find it. I made how many thousand trips from out there to back here.
Several.
And to put this tongue and groove on the floor, you get down with every piece, back up, you know, and have to fit it. Sometimes some of it had a bigger tongue than others. It was a different type of whenever they added into the first house we called the 80-year-old house was all the flooring, these rafters, all the columns that I ripped down from 2x8s and made 2x4s. Some of them are actually 2 1/4 inches wide, and some of the 2x8s were actually all the way a ½ inch wider than that. And I used them for the joist underneath. And when I got over there on that side, I noticed one day, one of them was sticking up that high. It didn't match the others. And that's when I finally realized, hey, these things are not the same width. So I had to start trying to work that out and rip some of them down. And you just can't imagine the work it took to pull the square nails out of this place and to save the tongue and groove from tearing it up. Two of the large rooms in the 100-plus-year-old house, ceiling, walls, floor. Older people remember one electrical wire hanging down with one light bulb in a huge room. There was 2 of those rooms like that over there at that one. And the house was well built. Some of the angles they cut with their old saws and all, and the boards they ripped. I hadn't looked it up, but I wonder how did they rip these big trees 100+ years ago. And 2 things I really remember on tearing them down was the pilings that the house sits on. The first one was sitting on pine stumps on the ground. And I couldn't believe what good shape. I've got 3 of them I saved out there. The next one was river rock, old stone, and they had to cut it out of the river somewhere close to Adams Corn Mill, I believe, the old river over there, because they couldn't haul these things. They 200, 250 pounds a piece. There's 30-something of them under this big older house. I brought 10 or 12 home, but the folks that owned it, they wanted some of them, so I moved them with my tractor loader and all for them. But they were quite unique. They were all about the same length, but they're all different sizes that I made as my pillows for my benches out around the fire pit. So I try to use a little bit of all of it. And as far as new stuff, the electrical stuff is new. The plumbing was new. And basically that's about it. I bought these air conditioning heater units. And I didn't have much money invested in this place. All I got is 2.5 years. I started in I started in March 2019, tearing the first one down. And I hired a boy to help me that was a hard worker, so he helped me tear that one down. That's the most help I had on anything. But as far as building it, I didn't have any. Even on the second house, I didn't use him. So I wanted to do it all by myself anyway. And when I look at it, I wonder how I did it, really, because it's a lot of work. I started in August, setting my block and all underneath. I brought 188 blocks home from the first house where they had added a couple of rooms on a few years after it was built, and they used some blocks then. And so I used all of those underneath this until I got down a certain way, and then I stacked them and left 8 foot so they'd be real stout and sturdy. But it all worked out. Priscilla helped me pull the string on it, and, the line and all, and get it square. You know how to do that. People know how to do that, I'm sure.
And she was your moral
So
support.
how did it grow from stopping right here to
Well,
what it is now?
My beautiful wife would come down and
Listen,
sit and watch
I
me
was the
work.
chief project manager on
Yes.
this. That was
And
the
she
whole
says,
thing.
honey, can't you put a kitchen back there? And I said, well, yeah, if you want one. So I went on further, I redid it, and went on and went back. Well, long story short, we wound up that much more right there, which is about 20 more feet. And this is actually 20 because I had to go narrow because of my huge pine trees. I didn't want to move those. And we did this, and then I built the barn, the cabinets, all that. And then she says, how about I'd like to have a bedroom? Well, I said, okay. So I threw a bedroom in over there on that side. And it was so high off the ground over there, I put a step down because I didn't want it all that high on back there. Got all that going, framed it in and all. And she was sitting down here one day and brought 2 chairs. And she says, can you put some windows up there? It's so pretty looking back through the trees and all. I said, well, what do you think? She said, well, I know you can, but will you? I said, yes, I'll do that. And so it was a good time because I hadn't finished, so I had to go cut back some of it. And then one day she says, well, could we put a bathroom in down here? I said, yeah. So I added that on the back, bathroom and the pantry there that you see. And then on later, I had a lot of lumber left from that big house, old junk. She wanted a storage room, so I got a 400 square foot storage room. And this is 1,400 square feet heating and cooling space in here. It's not small. People look at it outside and they see this narrow building down here, and everyone that comes through the door, first thing they start looking and say, wow, this is big, And it is 60 foot long, so that looks, and with a big open tall ceiling, it's pretty large. But I enjoyed it. I would work from 7 o'clock to sometimes midnight, going 90 to nothing. And I couldn't hardly make it to the house to get a shower. Be back the next day, here we go.
Yeah.
My heart doctor says my body is amazing. So I do well. 26 years coming up from a massive widowmaker and open heart surgery. He said, you don't see people like, he thought he'd lost me 4 or 5 times, and he's my 4th cardiologist. And when this girl came in the 6th grade, her hair was hanging down here below her waist. And that got me. I used to walk her home and push my bicycle.
You would walk
She didn't like
along with
me,
your
but I
bike.
liked her.
Oh, okay. Okay, she liked you too, obviously.
Well, she later found out she did, because all the girls liked me, and she was jealous.
Oh, okay. So
I'm
she
bragging
had to-
now.
She had to swoop in like a hawk.
Oh yeah, she did.
Well, that was true.
Talk to me about friendship. Y'all talked about being married for so long. You talked about basically growing up together in some kind of way. When I was here earlier, Priscilla told me about keeping me and April as a child, and and the way y'all used to keep each other's kids. Tell me about friendship. What does that look like?
Well, our friendship was strained at one time. I was the football center, and I snapped the ball to Norman, and I guess it was before the first game we had. He went to the coach and said, I don't like Andy being the center. And the coach is like, what's wrong? He said, when he snaps the ball to me to punt, it's spinning in the wrong direction. So we had to make some adjustments so that we could get a right-handed snapper.
Well, the main thing for extra points, and I was probably one of the first ones around to keep field goals, and the holders, it messed them up trying to catch the ball.
He's
true.
blaming it on somebody else now.
And they came crying to me, and I would say, Coach, we're going to move the center. And that's basically the way it went.
I moved for those snaps, those long snaps. I moved over to guard. The guard moved to tackle.
I still let him snap it,
He was minimally adequate for the snapping part, for the close in, but for the rest of the stuff, it was unacceptable.
Yeah. He probably has a unique position in my life. He probably has put his hands up against my butt more than any other man.
I would hope so, more than that, because, I mean, that's a lot of times in practicing ball games.
Close friendship.
Yeah.
Close in a lot of ways.
Our first house we bought was on the east side of Dothan in Cloverdale subdivision. And we bought a house down on a dirt road. The last road paved was on up a block above us. But anyway, it was a corner lot and had it fenced in. And wound up, Andy and Glenda bought one right up the road. So here we are,
Oops.
neighbors almost again. Go ahead.
Andy and Glenda already lived there, and Glenda calls me up one day.
Yeah.
We were looking for a house because we needed to move. We had been renting an apartment. And she calls me up. I think she just heard we were looking for a house in Dothan. I had talked this country boy into moving to city. I'd always been a city girl. I'd never lived in what we call rural country. And so I talked him into moving since we were both working in Dothan. I talked him into moving to Dothan because it was going to be so much more convenient. I thought I could make a city dude out of this guy, this country man. So Glenda calls me up and she says, there's this wonderful house on a great deal right a block from us. And so that's actually how we got on to this house, was your mom and dad lived over there on the corner. And so we moved on the next corner. And again, it was like, if we stepped out our patio, our back door, we could look. If they wanted to step on their front porch, we could see each other and wave because we were one block apart. So it's really been a small world for us, for as two couples. I treasure the fact that through all of the things we've been through, the moving back to the country, because I could not make a city man out of this country boy. Even after 8 years, he hated every day of having neighbors. He did not like it. He said, I just cannot do this. I really want to be out on our own. I would like to build a house, and I would like to have a little bit of room to breathe, and I can't do that here. And through the building the house here originally almost 50 years ago, and moving back here, your mom and dad moving to Florida and all those years, we've still stayed. There's always been some threads there. I got up some other friends and said, when your sister got married, said, we're going to that wedding. We're going to go down there. And so I got two other friends, and I said, I'll drive. I'll take my car. I know that surprises you, but But anyway, we went down there, and so we were there for that wedding because that was important to I felt like it was important to Glenda that she had these friends there, and so there's always been threads there. There's been so many things that have kept us close, and it's been interesting things. Like I said, the going to school together, the going to church together, the being in the band. I actually was in band before I was a cheerleader, so being in band, and Glenda probably doesn't even remember me in band, but I was in the color guard for 2 years, and so that was because I couldn't play a note. I mean, a note, and
Was
I
that
wanted
the
to be
coach calling you?
I wanted to be
Yeah.
Tell you can center again?
I wanted to be, a majorette. Well, you had to play an instrument. Well, I couldn't play a note. I tried, and so finally he said, well, would you like to carry a gun? And I said, that'll be fine. So I carried a gun as a color guard before I became a cheerleader. We've always been tied in some way, and I cherish that. You don't have a lot of people that can trace their friendships back as closely as we have for almost 60 years.
The 8 years that you all lived in Cloverdale, we were in Sunday school together.
Oh, yes.
I remember our class starting a church library
Yes.
and us getting together and cataloging some of the books. And of course, Norman was our star softball player.
Yeah, we had a church team.
We played, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I still got the glove, the softball glove that I had that I
Really?
used back then. Not that I could catch anything, but I was again not a star player, but
Oh, he gave it all though. Andy was all right.
Well, I remember getting a call asking me could I keep Jody for her to go have Chucky.
Yes.
Remember?
Oh, yes. When I went into labor, which I was already 2 weeks overdue, but when I went into labor, I didn't realize I was in labor because it was quite different on the second time. And our plan was that when I went into labor, we would take, or Norman would take our oldest son, Jody, because he was 5 years difference in those boys, that he would take them up to my mother's, and my mother would keep him while I went to the hospital and had a baby. That was the plan. When babies get ready to come, they don't care what kind of plans you have. They just go ahead and start coming. Well, I didn't realize I'd been in labor all night because I just didn't have typical labor pains. So I didn't know till the next morning when Norman is cooking breakfast for Jody and I'm getting ready and I'm in there fixing my hair like it's going to matter. You know, I'm about to go to, to deliver a baby.
We were late because she was trying to get
And
beautiful.
And so I'm standing there and I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like screamed for Norman. I said, uh-oh, we're about to have a baby. And he says, well, I don't have time. He said, I've got to take Jody somewhere. And I said, you don't have time to go and take him to Midland City. Call Glenda and see if Glenda will keep him. And so he grabbed me and he grabbed Jody and put him in the car. We literally pushed Jody out. Glenda said, I'll be on the front steps there and, just bring him up. We literally pushed that baby
Threw him
out
to me.
and just pushed him out of the car. And Glenda had to just grab him up for me to get to the hospital. As it was, we barely made it to the hospital. I didn't have any assistance in that delivery. I just had a baby when I got there.
Almost on an elevator.
Yes. And said, we've got so many stories that intertwine us. Your mom called, how many years ago has it been since we went to Orlando and saw April's team?
Oh,
5,
four,
6,
five.
5 years ago I got a call and she said, would you like to go down and see April's dance team
And I gave you
compete?
2 days' notice.
Yes, and we jumped in that car and went to Orlando. Had a blast. We had several bumps in the road, but it was still a blast. We had a blast. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing April and seeing what she does and is so good at, and how she relates. And being a teacher myself, as to see how she relates to those youngsters, those young women, it was quite amazing. And to see all of the talent that was gathered there, and that's just from this area. I suppose it's not all over the United States, is it? That competition, or
Yes,
is it?
it's all over the United States.
It's just amazing how talented, how many people have so much talent, and that was such an interesting trip that we did. We went on vacation together several years ago and went to Savannah and Charleston.
Hilton Head.
Had a blast, especially on the roundabouts, right? we have some stories to tell.
Let's begin to close this out, but let's close with thinking about legacy. What kind of legacy do you guys? We're sitting here in a beautiful place. It's already over 100 years old, and things go on. When we're no longer around. Is there a thought while the camera's rolling about a legacy, about something that might stay?
well, I think I'll jump in. I think one of the things that we have been instrumental in that will follow after us is the standing up of the Alumni Association for the high school. I mean, there's been several people that have been instrumental in making it happen, but the four of us have always been in the middle of it. Over the past 8 years, we've donated to the school, to the students, to the organizations, some $23,000. Not the four of us, but through our efforts. So I think that 10 years from now, if the organization is still in existence or not, that that alumni association will become a part of our legacy.
Any other thoughts?
I think that I hope that when we're gone, say 10, 15 years from now, if somebody thinks back to Dale County High School or to Midland City or to Pinkard or Newton, which kind of covers the areas that we all lived in at the time, that one of the things, well, they're talking about what we call old timers. You know, we don't think of ourselves as that, but we'll still say the old timers, that some of the faces that will appear for them and the names that they'll think of are us. While it may not be all of us, at least one of us. Because I think that in our own way, each one of us has had a great impact on this community in this area and Dale County High School. And I hope that we're spoken of in those terms, that we were instrumental in doing a lot of good things, in trying to live our life in the way that we would want others to live theirs, and that we were good friends, not only to each other, but to many others. And that would be my legacy.
These two women are two of the most giving and caring that I've ever known, really. And a lot of people around don't realize that. A lot of it's behind the scene and all, but they are very giving and loving, and I appreciate having this one all my life. She's kept me going, and I appreciate Linda. Like I say, we've known each other all of our lives, and I appreciate Andy. He's a lot smarter than I am. Yeah.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
But I volunteered to coach city ball in Dothan when we lived down there. I coached 18 years. I coached both boys' team, and I played softball at the same time. So this lady can keep a scorebook better than anybody you'll ever meet, because she kept many, many scorebooks and games. And speaking of gloves, I found gloves and balls from both boys when I was cleaning out my shed the other day. It's bring back quiet memories, and where Jody was a weightlifting champion on leg lifts and all for the state back when he was in high school, and where he had pitched a perfect game against Abbeville one day. And anyway, they both were good athletes, and that's why I probably won every year, whatever league it was. We probably won, but it's mainly because of my boys. They did what I asked them to do. They both of them pitched one game, and then they'd catch the next one, rotated back and forth on each team. So they were good little ball players. Mm. So this old redneck, a lot of the big wheels and seers, I don't know why they liked me, but they did. And I did well. It was a great company, and they had some good coffee. And Priscilla loved the cheeseburgers better than anything from that old coffee shop there.
I remember as a kid going in there to see you at the Sears store. Yeah. I remember going, knowing that you worked there. Knowing that I knew somebody that worked in that big building.
2 days a week that I had to close up, I always went on in at 6 o'clock and opened up anyway. Well, I'd be there from 6 o'clock till 9:30 at night, both of those days. So I spent a lot of hours on my feet going through. Had a cast on my foot one time, and I busted the cast out. And then one time I cut one off with a hacksaw because I wanted to play some more ball. And the manager came in there to clean the store up and get rid of a bunch of us. And he told me, said, "Now you can't work like that. You got to quit playing ball." And I said, "No, Mr. Jones, I'm not quit playing ball now." And anyway, he wound up being a big shot when he left there. He was over the whole group, New Orleans group, and we went fishing together some. He'd come by one day. He said, "How's your work?" I said, "It's all right, boss." He said, "Go get your boat and pick me up at the house in an hour." And then I couldn't drag him away at night. He's talking. He drank a few beers. He'd be talking, cigar. And Anyway, he was all right. Most people couldn't stand him because he was kind of a, you know, aggravating fella. And you knew that he was in there to clean house because the manager had been there for years and years, old Roger Story. But anyway, it was some good times. Sears was one big family wherever I went.
That's great.
They'd take me in. I'd wind up playing ball and that, like in Savannah. We wound up a team. We went to the state, and in Georgia we won the state softball tournament. And I'll never forget the Nats, that black Nats. They would eat you up. In the first game I was playing center field, and I went in the dugout and I said, God, what do y'all do with these Nats? I've never seen anything like these bite like this. Oh, we got some stuff here. You put it on you. It was that Avon stuff, whatever it was. It would
Yeah.
keep them off of you.
So
But they were awful. Some of our best years growing up together was with Sears, one big family. Anywhere I was, I'd find a lot of clothes for Priscilla. We had a petite section way back when, and the manager in Dothan, she would find something, she'd call me. I think Priscilla like this. I said, well, put it back. So I spoiled her in the early years, and she's still like that now.
That's right.
That's one reason she kept me around, I think.
Probably right.
One.
Probably right.